Hey there, and welcome to Ministry Matters, a podcast where we talk about campus ministry here at Hannibal LaGrange University. Today, we will be talking to Pastor Leewood. Pastor Leewood is the discipleship pastor and college pastor at Emmanuel Baptist Church here in Hannibal. Hey, Pastor Leewood, it's great having you here on the podcast today, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, man, we're glad to have you on here today and ask you a few questions about campus ministry in general, but also just the college ministry for people here at HLGU. So I wanted to open it up with our first question today. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and talk about your upbringing.
Yeah, so I was originally born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I was born and raised in South Arkansas. Literally lived in the same house for 18 years. My family affiliation with church was kind of a mixed bag because whenever I was 8 years old, my family was super involved in church. My dad was actually like the youth guy of our youth group. I had two older brothers who were 10 and 12 at the time, and both of them had made professions of faith. But as an 8-year-old, it just wasn't something that was really on my mind. And so when I was 8, my family decided to no longer be in church. They were at least at that church, and they were going to go find another one. But that never actually happened. And so from 8 until 18, I wasn't in church. And so as far as my upbringing, I do have kind of like this mixed bag of having clear memories of going to church as a young child, but also whenever I was, in those formative years as a teenager, was not in church at all. And Pine Bluff, Arkansas is a bit of a rough spot. A lot of drugs, a lot of gangs, a lot of lower income areas, and it's not a great place to be from. And the way I describe it is I did everything you would imagine an 18-year-old who grew up in Pine Bluff and didn't know Jesus. That's what I did. And so I had this weird mixed bag of growing up in Pine Bluff that is low income, not a great city, but also I grew up on 40 acres out in the woods. Grew up around cattle, grew up around horses, that kind of jazz. And so there's this weird dichotomy of growing up in a place with a lot of drugs in a city and also living out in the woods, also having grown up in church, but also not having grown up in church. And so kind of have that weird mixed bag there, the youngest of 3 boys, and kind of wild to say the least there.
Yeah, absolutely. You got a mixed bag of everything pretty much right there.
Yeah,
in
very
life,
much so.
You? Yeah,
very
that's
much
awesome.
So.
And kind of talking about like your faith and your upbringing and everything, because it seemed like in your early life at least, you were able to be in church a little bit, but then later in life, it kind of ended a little bit when your parents decided to not be part of that church anymore. But can you kind of tell us specifically what faith means to you?
Yeah, I would say that if I kind of take it chronologically as to what it meant whenever I was going to church with my family, it meant nothing in the sense of I wasn't a believer. My family had made professions of faith, but that wasn't me. Whenever I was 18, I started dating a girl who went to church, and because I liked hanging out with her, your boy went to church. And so that's how I got goat roped into this whole Jesus thing. Was she liked going to church and hanging out there, and I liked hanging out with her, so I went. And at that time, like, I very much had like a lot of false values as to what was most important for my own life, just kind of what I thought was going to provide for me the most beneficial outcomes. And that doesn't necessarily mean like I was thinking long term, but it just meant like I was much more concerned with being selfish and playing baseball and that kind of jazz. So like my identity was wrapped up in something that was absolutely not church. Don't necessarily need to like go into the details, but I can tell you like I wasn't like a superstar athlete either. So like I didn't really even have a good reason to have my identity in sports, but that's where it was. And so I was just more concerned with just enjoying what I thought I could enjoy. But when I was 18, I kept hanging out at this church at Hardin Baptist Church there in Pine Bluff. And there was a guy named Jim Parker who was the youth pastor, and I loved hanging out with Jim. He told great stories. Dude was hilarious, had like this really magnetic personality. And so I loved hanging out with him. But man, I hated being around this dude because for 6 months, every time I hung out with him, we would be hanging out, having fun, telling funny stories, and then he'd talk about sin, and I'd just be like, dude, I'm out. Like, I don't want to do this. And then I would leave thinking, well, that was the last time I go there, and then I'm there the next week, right? So, like, clearly, in hindsight, I can see that's how the Lord was working in my life. And it eventually got to the point where I had a conversation with my grandparents because they were still faithful church members. And I went and had a conversation with them about faith. And my central hang up when it came to faith in Christ was I understood Bible stories. I understood who Jesus was. I could even quote you stories and probably even some verses if I had to. And I knew the right answers, like Jesus was a real man. He was the Son of God. He died for us. Like, it was like a very intellectual based knowledge of like, yeah, I think that seems true to me, but there was no real faith. And so your question of what did faith mean to me then? Well, it meant nothing before I was 18, but when I was 18, before I became a believer, was like, well, it's just a list of facts that you intellectually ascend to. And through that conversation with my grandparents, it became really clear that faith is so much more than just checking the box and saying, oh yeah, that's something I intellectually agree with. And it was through a conversation with them that my grandfather shared the illustration of a chair and how you don't go and inspect a chair and you look at it and you test it out and, you know, make sure it's going to hold you up. You sit in it, and that's what holds you up, is that you actually have faith in it. You have enough knowledge to tell you that chair is going to hold you up. Now, if there's a bunch of splinters and nails and junk hanging out of that joker, yeah, don't sit in it. Like, wisdom tells you that much. And he kind of correlated that to my understanding of Jesus and said, it sounds like you know the right things, but do you feel like you need him? And that was the real question, is like, do I need Jesus? And that was where the longest part of the conversation really kind of was wrapped up in. And so I got brought to this point through the Holy Spirit that I realized like I did need him. And so when I was 18, that identity of finding my own pleasure and sports and whatever else, like that really quickly went away. And that kind of left me like wondering what was next. And so my faith at that point was I was just searching. And that time I was already part of the military. I joined the Army when I was 17, and there in the Arkansas National Guard. And so I was already in the military. I had already had plans for basic training and then going to all my school afterwards. And so the threat there was that my identity got replaced from baseball to now military. And so for the next couple of years, like there was a real struggle as to like what was going to be the thing that I found that I needed. But it was when I was in Iraq the first time in 2004, 2005, that's whenever I realized that like my identity was centrally located in Christ, and it had to be. I had read through the entire Bible once. I had read through the New Testament a second time and through the Old Testament about 3/4 of the way. So I was basically done with the entire Bible twice in 9 months, and I was just voraciously reading it. And the more that I read, the more that I realized like faith was not something that was just like tacked on to the periphery of my life. Like it had to be the thing that was driving me. And I didn't really have like a really robust understanding of like theology or even like how to do what Christianity instructed us to do, because I hadn't really been discipled. I had just been reading a whole lot. But I knew that my faith had to come to that point of like, I couldn't find it centralized in anything other than Christ, because I had already tried that and that did not go well. And so I think from that time of 20, 21 years old until now, almost 40, like I think that's held true, is that my identity is in Christ, and what it is that faith means to me is that I don't live for myself. I live for others, and I live in a way that is pleasing to the Lord, which leads me to do some things that are kind of crazy at times.
Yep, absolutely. I think that for many people that who have made that decision to follow Jesus, that they could say the same thing about their testimonies, that they had an identity issue from the very beginning.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I can definitely say that about myself and honestly relate to you in the aspect of saying that baseball was your identity. I was the same exact way for a long time, but the Lord eventually straightened me out. He straightened you out as well, obviously, so there you go. That's awesome.
Yeah, but you were probably better than me, though.
Well, it may have been a little fat. Well, it was in college, though, when
I didn't even make it to college. So,
well, he straightened you out quicker, and he straightened me out. So,
yeah.
But just different circumstances.
Yeah.
But obviously, along your journey, you've been brought to the point where you got called into ministry and doing these sorts of things, and you ended up here in Hannibal, Missouri, and you're at Emmanuel Baptist Church. Just wanted to ask you, how did you actually end up at Emmanuel Baptist?
Yeah, so the way that I ended up in Emmanuel, I have to explain what college was like for me and what happened as a result of that. I was the guy that in college, like I was a 21-year-old combat vet vet as a freshman, which there weren't a whole lot of us running around at that point. And so that I was just kind of an odd duck already. But because of that, I kind of got put into a couple of leadership positions at my BCM at the Baptist Collegiate Ministry there at the University of Arkansas. And during that time, that's when I started to learn what being a disciple meant. So I was actually being discipled. I was in a small group. I was in a Bible study. I was actually learning how to put into practice all the head knowledge that I had gained over the last year of just voraciously reading the Bible. But the thing was, I was also an absolute jerk. Like, I was that guy that would beat people up with the Bible because I was the dude that, like, dude, I've been a Christian for 2.5 years. You've been a Christian for 15, and you don't know these things. And so there was, like, a very clear refining process through my BCM, through my church, where there were some men who discipled me that made a huge impact in my life. And that is where my love for college ministry came from. And so whenever I was deployed the second time back to Baghdad in 2008, 2009, I had already been working at my BCM at my church, and then was deployed. And when I came back, I went back to working for the BCM in my church, and eventually just moved to the church doing church-based college ministry. But I'd basically been doing ministry for a couple of years at that point. And all the while, my goal was to teach high school history. So my goal was to get a degree in history, go get my MAT, teach high school, and go that route. And after my second deployment, I had a couple of men who had mentored me who came up to me, and 3 of them on 3 different occasions, without talking to each other, all asked if I had considered going to seminary. And I didn't grow up in church. And so the first guy who asked me, I'm like, yeah, I'll consider seminary. And I didn't. And then the second guy asked, hey, you should consider seminary. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And I didn't. And then my third guy, Josh Malden, who I worked for at the church, he's like, man, you should really consider seminary. And I'm like, hey, Josh, can I tell you something? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I don't know what seminary is. I don't think I actually know what that is. And he was like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, dude. Like, I don't actually know. I've heard you talk about it, but I don't know what that is. And he was like, well, it's what pastors go to get training. And I'm like, oh yeah, I think I'll do that. Yeah, I'll consider that. And then as soon as that conversation happened, like, I knew that teaching high school was not going to be where the Lord was leading me. And so I started really feeling that call to ministry that was affirmed through those same 3 men and some other church leaders. And so I'd already been doing college ministry for about 4 years at that point, so since 2006, really. So this is, I mean, I've been doing college ministry for almost 20 years. I went to seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. After I was done my time there in Louisville, I went to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and was leading a BCM there at the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith. And I was there for 8 years doing college ministry. I was an elder at my church, so I was pastoring there, and my position went away there in Arkansas. And during that process, we were just praying what the Lord was leading us to do. And we knew there was going to be a role with college ministry, but we also felt like the Lord was leading me towards a church. And so, frankly, that's how we landed on a church. The fact that it was Emmanuel here in Hannibal, Arkansas, Hannibal, Missouri, I had no idea what Hannibal was like, did not even know where it was on the map. Just through like job websites for ministry positions, I saw it, and it was just really clear whenever we entered into the process for this position that this is where the Lord was leading. So a very circuitous route to get to this point, but the highlights there are, this was not my plan for my life. I will clearly say that. Whenever it became clear that this is what the Lord wanted me to do, I haven't wanted to do anything but work with college students and pastor. And so I've done that in a couple different avenues. But here at Hannibal, specifically at Emmanuel, like, I just feel like this is where the Lord has us, and we're enjoying being here. So been here for 2 years at this point.
Well, praise God that He's brought you here, because I can personally say that you being here has impacted not only Emmanuel in such a positive way, but also impacted our campus in such a positive way. Because for the people who are listening who don't know, I'm also a part of Emmanuel Baptist Church. I'm the worship leader there. Heck yeah, man. We get to work together. Such a pleasure sometimes with you.
Sometimes it's a headache.
Sometimes, every once in a while, but such a blessing that you ended up in Hannibal, Missouri, of all places, and that you're involved here at HLGU and at Emmanuel. It's such a blessing. But to keep talking about Emmanuel a little bit, kind of wanted to ask you to give our listeners kind of an idea of what's going on. at Emmanuel Baptist Church. Can you kind of explain what Sundays look like at Emmanuel?
Yeah, and I'll let you fact check me on this as to if my perception and how I'm characterizing it is slightly off. But Emmanuel, we have anywhere between 180 and 200 folks there every Sunday morning. We are a traditional church, and traditional in the sense of just like aesthetically, when you walk in, it's going to look like a church that is a traditional church. There's stained glass windows on the side. There's a big stained glass cross at the in the back of the baptistry. So that aesthetic is what you might imagine, a bunch of pews. However, there's for all the traditional elements, there's also some non-traditional elements. We have small groups that meet. For about half of our groups are Sunday school classes, especially with like our adults, say 50 years old and older, are typically Sunday school classes, and then our children from 13 down are in Sunday school classes, and then pretty much everyone else is in small groups. And so there's a little bit of a dynamic there that's slightly different. But then whenever we get into big church, whenever we actually go do worship, our average demographic, the median age is probably somewhere around 55 to 60. That's probably changed now with as many college students as we have.
Yep.
But even though that's what the median age of the church is, at any given time, as you will tell, is there's half the folks on the stage are college students who are leading. You as a worship leader, and then you have done such a good job of like building a team, rotating folks within the church, and then college students who have joined. And so we have a worship through singing style that is contemporary, blended, traditional. I don't know exactly. I mean, people, whenever they say blended, that means different things to different people.
Right.
We have hymns that we sing. There's a lot of hymns that we sing that are reimagined or rearranged in some manner. There are times we do straight up hymns. We have a lot of songs that are not. We try to incorporate as much as we can as far as video for being able to be interactive in different ways and engaging people in different ways. We try to leverage technology as much as we can, but still maintain being that traditional feel. Theologically, we're an incredibly conservative church. And I think that's one of the reasons why Emmanuel has been such a steady church, is that we know who we are, we know what we believe about the Bible, and we stick to it. So that doesn't mean that we're not willing to engage in new ways. It just means that that's what you're going to get whenever you walk in, and we're unapologetic about that. And so there's this weird mix between being incredibly traditional while also being blended or more contemporary, especially depending on what demographic you're talking about. So if you're with the youth, it's going to feel different than with your college students and young adults versus our senior adults. It doesn't mean that there's disunity or that there's any kind of division within the church, that we're just doing completely different things, but it just means that there's a different air depending on who you are, and frankly, whoever you are, what you're looking for, you can probably find at the church.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like we have such a wide range of ages at our church now, especially with the increase of college students that we've seen in the past couple of years, seeing all sorts of kids running around doing kids ministry, and then you have the youth group that is continually growing, and then you've got the college students, and you've got young adults, and you've got kind of more in the mid range, and then you've got the older senior adults that were. I feel like it's just such a good blend of so many different people within our church, which makes it such a great dynamic, I feel like. And we've got, just to add to that element on the upper end of the demographic, one of our deacons right now, a guy named R.O. Parker, there are literal benches and other plaques with his name across this campus that you will find. The theater on campus is named after him and his wife. So R.O. in Berlin. R.O. has been a deacon at our church for 60 years. Not a deacon somewhere else, but a deacon here for 60 years. And so, that kind of speaks to the longevity and the dedication that we have within the church. Yes. And, granted, I can't have 60 years anywhere. I'm not even 40, but, there are more than a few folks that have been members for,
40, 50 years
Yeah.
at Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm. It's such a great commitment from those people, and it's really awesome to see. But kind of to switch it around a little bit, kind of want to talk about how Emmanuel is more involved here on campus at HLGU. And more recently, we've been seeing that Emmanuel's connecting with HLGU, sending students and doing like mission stuff.
Yeah.
So wanted to, if you could go into detail a little bit about the mission trips that Emmanuel has sponsored and how all that works out.
Yeah, so in the last 2 years, which I mean, that's kind of my limited knowledge about what I can personally speak about. We can start most recently with even going back to this spring break with Beach Reach, where we took 8 students and 3 adult old guys, myself and Mario and John Jome, who's one of our deacons at Emmanuel. We were there in Panama City Beach over spring break. Last summer and last spring break, there was a trip to Montana that took, I think, probably about a dozen or so college students that were either connected to Emmanuel directly or got connected with Bethel Baptist Association through the university because Emmanuel was going. So we were the ones on the trip, and it was kind of a Bethel trip, associational trip. But we've had different things there. And that's not even including like the ways in which the church serves the university through just different gifts and like financial gifts. We give and support directly. There's all sorts of things that we do on campus as far as like just campus ministry events that kind of might be kind of low impact, not in the sense of like it's not a worthwhile thing, but it's like it's not super showy. Whenever we do move-ins, we've got ice chests and we've got folks out there carrying everybody's junk upstairs. Like that's just what we do.
Yep.
We do all sorts of stuff like that when it comes to different sports. I know that we've got several of our families at Emmanuel who are home away from home parents, and so I know that we've adopted several athletics students, and so we've got several folks who are at the athletics, whether it's at volleyball, basketball, baseball. We are around and we are visible. So there's all sorts of other ways that we were there. I know historically the church has partnered with HLG when it came to trips to Israel, when it comes to trips to Romania, when it comes to trips to South America, when it comes to Ecuador.
Yep.
So we've been involved. I just can't speak personally about my own experience because I haven't been here long enough to actually been able to do that. But yeah, there are plenty of opportunities when it comes to wanting to serve in a mission trip in one capacity or another. I think even this next 2 weeks from now, the campers on mission are going to be here on campus, who are going to be helping work on some of the dorms that are here, and we're hosting them for a couple of meals. We're going to be doing some of their housing stuff. So we're in like Flint around here, that's
right.
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's some of a smattering of options there that we've done here in the recent past.
Right. Yeah. It's very obvious as well. And obviously you think that campus ministry is really important.
Oh yeah.
Because you're so involved with it, not only at Emmanuel, but you're here a lot. You spend a lot of hours here on campus. You're present, which I think is such an amazing thing. So obviously, not just in the way that you talk, but in your actions, you believe and think that campus ministry is important. Can you explain to us why you think campus ministry is so important?
Yeah, I think the first thing that kind of like that drives me, even kind of going back to the identity question and what does faith look like for me, like I really found my identity in Christ when I was in college. That's whenever I started working out what the Bible was supposed to do in your life, not just what you know, but how it's supposed to actually impact your life and the lives of those around you. And so college was incredibly formative for me. That's whenever I determined like I didn't want to be teaching high school. I determined I wanted to spend my life working with college students. The examples of men in college ministry that I have is a guy named Leewood, who's one of my mentors. He was our campus minister at the University of Arkansas for over 30 years. One of his close friends was at Arkansas State in Jonesboro, Arliss Dickerson. He was the campus minister at Arkansas State for 40 years. They actually have at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, there's the Arliss Dickerson Chair of College Ministry. So like they have an endowed position named after Arliss Dickerson. Arliss Dickerson and Lynn, one of their guys they discipled, and mainly Arliss, is a dude named Steve Masters. And Steve Masters is the campus minister down at Louisiana State University at LSU, and he's been down there for 35 years. And so if you go anywhere in the state or anywhere in the nation, you're going to run into people who know those three names. And those were guys that I was connected with, and they had done college ministry their whole life. And so my example of college ministry and just ministry in general was not this model of you go from one location to the next every 3 years and it's always a step up. These were men who were there thick and thin, through the best of times and the worst of times. And so for me, I saw that as an example from not just college ministry as like an administrative and vocational thing, but also just practically, ministerially, how important it was. And so to answer the question directly of why do I think it is so important is because I don't think there are any more formative 4 years of anyone's life, period. 0 to 4. Nope. I don't think that's as formative outside of somebody, dropping you out a window or whatever, right? Like there are no more formative 4 years than the time that you're going to spend in college. That's whenever you really start figuring out who you are as a person, what kind of man or woman you're going to be, what kind of man or woman you're possibly going to marry, what your job is going to be, where you're going to live. Like we were talking about lifelong consequences and results of the decisions you make. And that was incredibly formative for me, and I know that to be true for college students today. And so if that is true, I will gladly fight any youth pastor who will say, well, high school. I'm like, no, I don't think they're going to mess your life up nearly as much as you will in college. Right. So like that tells me the stakes are higher. It's just, this is critical. And plus when you add on top of that, the statistics of the number of college students who were growing up in church and then leave the church, leave faith after graduating high school, and it's partly in response to how plugged in they are during college. Well, if that's something that is a real statistic, which it's empirically true, well, then we need to affect that as much as we can. And so I am doing my level best to affect that so that it wouldn't be said of this generation that 70% of them bounced. And so that's why I think it is so important, because the college ministry students that we have that are involved in church at campus ministries like here at HLG or BCMs across the nation, whatever it may be, these are our future church leaders. They're the future church planners. They're the ones who are going to be our missionaries. They desperately are looking for someone to disciple and train them. And I think my generation of college students, we kind of caught the leading edge of where people were starting to really pick up on that in a bigger way, and how catastrophic it was if you didn't do it. And I think we've learned the lessons over the last 20 years of like we can't afford to not invest in college students. And so that's why I do it personally. The joke with me and my wife is that I will stop doing college ministry when two things happen, and both of them have to happen. It can't be one or the other. Is that one, whenever I stop enjoying the things that college students enjoy, and when my maturity exceeds that of the average college student. That whenever those two things happen, then I'll consider not being in college ministry. But until then, I'm still here. And I'm still up at 3 a.m. at Beach Reach.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And the immaturity level is still there with us too. So heck yeah, man.
Yeah, it is. That's a badge of honor. I'll wear it.
Absolutely, man. I can honestly tell our listeners that there's no end in sight. So he is still here. He is still rocking it with us, and we are really glad he is. But kind of backtracking, I guess, a little bit. We were kind of talking about how Emmanuel is involved with, doing missions and whatnot here on campus. But what are some other college ministry events that Emmanuel has with HLGU?
Yeah, I think I have spoken at the gathering at least 5 times in 2 years, and a part of that was because of the transition between Titus and Mario, but also that was something I gladly would have done if either or neither of them were here.
Right.
So like me being involved there, we have hosted several, finals events whenever folks are like cookies and cocoa during the winter and during the spring
Yep.
finals is normally like ice cream or something like that. So we do stuff like that. We've got the move-ins that we do every fall. Whenever we do the welcome week events, whenever you have students that are coming on campus for new student orientation, we're here to do the activities fair, I think is what we actually call it.
Yep.
We're here for that. You'll see me trouncing around out there at the disc golf course or
Yep.
playing campus golf. I'm at chapel every single week. I'm in the dining hall at least once a week. We are visible in those ways. There might be something else that I'm missing that maybe you need to fill in that I'm missing there, but we try to be as visible as possible. But that doesn't mean that we do not have the vantage point at Emmanuel that HLG needs us to come and minister to their students. Like, that's not our vantage point. What we believe is that HLG needs churches to give students a church home.
Yep.
But there are people who are wise and are mature here. I'm just trying to come along and help do the thing that biblically is required of believers,
Right.
In providing that church home.
Right. And like in ways that you are providing that church home, to kind of go off of what you were talking about. We do have college lunch every so often.
Yeah.
It's like once a month or something
Yeah, the
like that.
first Sunday of the month.
First Sunday.
We do college lunch, and then the third Thursday is kind of the way it's worked out, where
Yep.
we do volleyball at the church.
Yeah, we have those two things that
At
are
least, yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. Those two things that are pretty big with our college students, as well as doing a new thing called Home Away from Home.
Yep.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Home Away from Home, I've gladly admitted to this. I stole this directly from a guy named Steve Moore, who was my first college pastor. He was one of my three dudes who asked me about seminary. Whenever Steve Moore was our college pastor at First Baptist Fayetteville, and I worked for him, we did Home Away from Home. And so the idea concerning Home Away from Home is that families within the church will adopt one or two college students, or 3 or 15, whatever.
Yeah.
And they will adopt these college students, and then once a month you'll do a meal. You'll be in their home. If the washers and dryers on campus are busted, then you go to your Home Away from Home family and you do your laundry there. If you live multiple hours away and you've got a flat tire, then your first call should be to your Home Away from Home family. We just wanted to give people a place where they felt at home here in Hannibal, even if they are not from here. And being able to provide, like, not just, hey, here's some folks that you can call, but rather here are some folks that you can call, and then you will go to their house and you will sleep on their couch, like that kind of jazz. Whenever I know that whenever we had some of the heating issues here on campus right when the semester began,
Yep.
I know Ashley was scrambling to try to find people to be able to put college students up for one of the dorms when the heat was out. And my first call was to all of my Home Away from Home families, because one, they've already said that they valued being able to be involved with college students, and if this was a real need, there was a place for them. So like, I immediately had at least 15 or 20 families who were ready to receive whoever they needed to. So yeah, Home Away from Home is one of those other things that we really push it in the fall, and then in the spring I kind of back off and let the families run it from there, because there should be those interactions and those relationships that are built. But yeah, Home Away from Home is just one of those other ways where we can have college students involved in church life and not feel like they are siloed off as college students. They are actually part of the church, and the way you do that is you get them in with families in the church.
Yeah. And recently, literally last week, I went out and was able to have dinner with me and one of my other buddies. Yeah, we're able to go out and have dinner with the Laws, which was a really good time. And it's always a good time to just not only just be with those people, but just know that they're going to be there for you as well, which I think is really encouraging, really great to have them there. But also, I think one other thing that is good for students to know is if you're worried about, like, you're a member at a church already, at another, your hometown church, you're worried about that, well, there's something that Emmanuel offers, and it's called a student membership, where you can still hold your membership at that church that you're at, but you can maintain that membership, but you can hold a student membership at Emmanuel, so you can be a member at both places, you can be involved at both places, and you don't have to feel like you're going against that other church.
Yeah, which that's one of those things that's kind of crazy to me, that some churches where a lot of church membership caveats for like student membership or dual membership, sometimes it's called watch care membership. It's kind of crazy to me that the way that began was that there are churches who will give a scholarship to a student who is going to a Baptist university, but they have to remain a member at that church because that's how, like, well, they're one of our members, we're giving them money. So if they were to change their membership to a church in town, even if that town is 5 hours away, they would lose the scholarship, which that kind of baffles me. So that's one of the answers of like, well, no, we don't want you to lose your scholarship, but we also want you to see how important church membership is. So it's basically dual membership. It's not like you are a step below any other member at Emmanuel if you're a student member. It just means that you hold your membership here and back home. And that's it. I mean, there's really no other distinction. We don't really transfer letters until you're done with college and however you want to do it from there. So there's not really a downside to it. It just provides some flexibility because college students are in a unique position because not everybody who comes to HLG are from, 10 miles out of Hannibal.
Right.
Like they are from God knows where.
Yep.
And so we want to be as accommodating as we can for that reason.
Yep. And talking about the local church a little bit, a commitment to Christ is a commitment to the local church. To
Anthony Schindler says that all the time.
Yeah, to quote Pastor Anthony, our head pastor at Emmanuel. But wanted to ask you personally, what are your goals for the future of campus ministry in Emmanuel Baptist Church?
Yeah, so if we were to talk about like big pie in the sky things, like I would love to be at a point where we eventually have a midweek worship service that is just college students. It could be midweek, it could be like a Wednesday, it could be late on Thursday nights. I love doing worship services that start at like 8 and 9 o'clock. Those are just that's what I grew up doing in college. Like that's just kind of the thing. And then do basketball afterwards, whatever. Do that kind of jazz. I would love to be able to get to a point where we're doing that. I think there's some other just kind of infrastructure things that we need to build out within the church and then just within the group to make that viable. But I think that was something to be really beneficial. I think one thing that we're already kicking around even for this summer is basically having not necessarily like an internship or like a residency program, but I am looking forward to the summers when students are around.
Yeah.
HLG is the type of university that whenever summer hits, unless you are physically here on campus for one precise thing because you work for the university, you're gone. You're just out. And if we can provide a reason for college students to stay here over the summer, that's 2.5, 3 months that I get to disciple college students without the distractions of other things going on. And what we would then be able to do is launch into the fall semester to where we have a student leadership team that is already blowing and going, where we plan different things for the fall and the spring coming out of those breaks. And frankly, I'm not the one that executes them. For us to be effective in being able to grow the college ministry, like I can't be the guy.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, I can't be as much as I'm on campus here, that's great for now. But what happens whenever we have twice as many students and I need to meet with 15 extra students every week? Like it's just, I don't have enough hours in the day. And at the end of the day, we have several college students who are called to ministry that this is a ripe place for them to cut their teeth in ministry because that's what I did. This is just because it's at a Christian university. It doesn't make it any different. So I would love to get to that point where we have students who are here over the summer, where we have students that are being discipled in a much more intensive way of doing something there that is not happening at any other time during the semester because of the church schedule or because of class schedules. And then the internship stuff, residency, we can work towards that. But I think like one of the next big steps is a student leadership team and some kind of regular worship service that's not chapel, that's not, and not to say anything negative against the gathering, but it's not the gathering because it's at Emmanuel. There are just certain things that we would do, and I feel like that we would be able to do to bring about a different result than the gathering is naturally built to produce. And so I look forward to working through figuring out how to do that. But it's going to take time to get there. I mean, we've only been here 1.5, 2 years doing college ministry in Hannibal, so it just takes time.
You're just getting your feet wet, man.
I'm just starting, man.
You're just getting started off here. But we kind of talked about this a second ago, like a commitment to Christ is a commitment to the local church. And I think that's something that our school in general emphasizes a lot is the importance of the local church. So wanted to ask you, what are the benefits of students being involved in a local church?
Yeah, and so I told y'all I was going to do this, and so I'll just go ahead and lay it out. Like, I am going to answer the question, but I think there's a better way to frame the question, because when we ask it in such a way that says, what are the benefits of being a member at a church as a college student, that implies at some level that it's not necessary. And so I think the better way to frame the question is, what are college students naturally forfeiting by not being members of a local church? Because when you ask it that way, it says, no, there's something you automatically are losing if you are not a member of a church. So those things that you automatically lose, well, those are the benefits of being a member of a church. Like, I get it, but I think that mindset is critical to see right out the gate. Anthony says a commitment to Christ is a commitment to the local church. St. Augustine, he one of the things he said is that you cannot have God as your father without the church as your mother. And so, I think that those two things go hand in hand. So what I know college students need, this is not a thing that you tack on. This is not a thing that you kind of, if you can get it, it's nice. Like, these are needs, legitimate needs that college students that are believers. One, they need a community. They need a community not of straight up just college students. Because if you have 500 college students all in a group, man, unless you've got the Spirit of God working in you like in an amazing way, you have pulled together collective ignorance. Right? You really have. The same way that if you go to a Sunday school class, it's got 500 people who are in a Sunday school class and they've had the same Sunday school class and they're all over the age of 60. Well, we've pulled together collective wisdom and it's sitting in that Sunday school class. We need to mix those two together. So college students need a community. One, yeah, they need other college students to hang out with. Like, there are certain things that I'm going to do at Beach Reach and that y'all will do at Beach Reach because y'all are college students that ain't nobody else at our church really going to dive into, because that's just not what God's called them to. So you need that college camaraderie, that community there, but you also need mature believers who have gone before you and they know what's up and they know where the potholes are on the road to tell you where that is. So they need that community. The second thing that comes along with that is they need to be discipled. Like, this is not optional. Discipleship, even my position at the church as being the discipleship pastor, discipleship for our church, we actually have one of our core values is deliberate discipleship. We do not believe that you can go be a believer by just going to church on Sunday and showing up occasionally, some other stuff, and that you will have been discipled. Like, there is more of a deliberative process that is necessary, and college students need that. Am I saying that you will not grow in your faith and in your maturity if you are a Christian studies major here at HLG? Like, no, I am certain you will. Will you grow if you go to the gathering? Absolutely. But what I do know is there is a biblical requirement to be a member of a church. There is no such biblical requirement to be at the gathering or to be enrolled at HLG. So if that's true, then now it's a matter of obedience. And so, one, we need community, and two, you need to be discipled, and three, frankly, you just need a safety net. Like, you really need a safety net of a local church that has authority over you. Whenever you join a church, you are functionally, especially with pastors, but even with the rest of the church, you are functionally giving them authority and permission to be in your business.
Yep.
And that is good, because I'm a bit of an idiot. I know I was a bit of an idiot as a college student, and I needed somebody to check me on that. And there are people who have gone before and said, yeah, this is not smart, dog. You shouldn't do that. And so there's that safety net of people who know you. To give an example, whenever it comes to guys and girls, whenever they're wanting to get married, if these two folks have been dating in isolation, and they have no one knows who they are in their life. They've never seen these two, this guy and this girl, interact in any way. And then they just show up and they're married one day. Well, now the church is on the back foot of saying, okay, well, let's try to help you. Like, now we're starting from square one. Whereas if these are students that everyone has known and they've grown up within the church as youth or even just as college students, and people have been able to observe them, like, the church can speak more actively and say, actually, this is a great idea. Like, we're going to come around you and help. Or they might say, this is a bad idea. Like, you should not do that. So we need that safety net. So those three were community, you need to be discipled, and you need a bit of a safety net. And I think the church is where that is found, first and foremost.
Yeah, would totally agree with that. And all this whole time has been so great, and kind of just wanted to bring it to an end here, and ask you if you had anything else that you wanted to add to any answers or anything, or anything that you think would be important for prospective students to know.
Yeah, I think as for whatever program you might be pursuing as a prospective student here, man, that's between you and the Lord. Like, I trust that God can use your degree in ways that maybe you haven't even comprehended that he's going to use. You might end up with some kind of degree here from HLG and never use it at all in the fashion that you had expected. But that's not to say that the Lord can't use it. I mean, that's exactly my story with pursuing a history degree from a huge secular school that led me to ministry. However, like, if you show up here and with the expectation of I'm just here for a degree, then you have missed the point of college. If all you are looking for is a sheepskin at the end of 3 or 4 years, then do everything online. Do not get involved in community. Don't do anything other than your homework. Go take your tests, go home. But that's never been what college is about. It has been about building in life skills and making connections with not just professionals that are in that field, but also with your peers. And whenever you put it in the context of a school like HLG, like, this is where your best friends for life are going to come from. This is where your best connections about how ministry is best done are going to come from. This is where you're going to find those churches that are going to be the standard bearer for you for the rest of your life of this is the kind of church I'm looking for that does these things, because you're going to experience it here in Hannibal. The issue for most students whenever they come to Hannibal, and frankly for most places, is the issue is not finding a good church. There are good churches. There are great churches here. The issue is finding the right church. And the right church is not one that meets all of your preferences. The right church is the one that the Lord's leading you to. And so if you're being led here to Hannibal to come to school here, then I would say that don't worry about the school, or don't worry about the church membership bit. Like, that's going to happen as a matter of course. Hang out with me long enough, and I'm going to be on you about, hey, where are you going to church? Come hang out with us. I'm a huge fan of Emmanuel, but if you're not going to be here, let me help you get connected somewhere else, right? So that's my goal, is to make sure that college students are members of churches, not members of Emmanuel, because I'm not the one in charge of where the Lord is leading somebody. I think we are a great church. I'm a huge fan. However, if I'm not the Lord, I'm not the one that determines where you should go. So yeah, I think for the fear for a lot of parents is going to be those kind of ancillary things around the university and student life. And I would just say, yeah, I don't think you have anything to worry about there.
Yeah, and I would agree. I'm a big fan of Emmanuel too.
There you go.
So
let's just say that.
If you're listening to it, I think it's a pretty great place. So just wanted y'all to know that. But Leewood, Pastor Leewood, thank you so much for being on here today.
My pleasure.
And talking with us. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast today.
All right, man.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you again, Pastor Leewood, for taking the time to be here with us and talking about campus ministry. This has been Ministry Matters. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.